Hi, this is the January 26th meeting of Manhattan Community Board 5 Transportation Committee. I'm David Sigmund, Chair, joined by Kiran Patel, our Vice Chair. Welcome also to Libby Hutton, Chair, and Mirinell Vikram, Vice Chair of the Parks, Public Spaces, and Environment Committee, who are joining us tonight. We're virtual today due to the weather state of emergency. Don't get used to it. Any items voted on at this meeting will appear at the full CV5 board meeting on Thursday, February 12th. We have two items on the public agenda today. We have a presentation from Department of Transportation on the Park Avenue Vision Plan to redesign the street and malls from 46th through 57th Streets. Then we have a discussion about a potential new street blade co-naming policy. And in new business, we're going to be doing a committee update on Penn Station. Kiran, if you could call the roll, we'll do attendance that way since we're all present virtually today and everybody counts towards quorum and for Transportation Committee.
Sure, David. Thank you. Charles?
Here.
Athena?
Present.
Alice? Ankur? Nancy?
Here.
Okay, Samir?
Here.
Christopher?
Yes.
I am here. Tiffany? Okay. Will?
Here.
Okay, David is here. Robert?
I'm here.
Okay. Kelly?
Here.
Okay, Mandy? Okay, Zool?
Present.
All righty, thank you. And Joel?
Here.
Thank you.
So we have a quorum.
Yes.
Okay. Before we jump into the agenda, if there are any members of the public or of the committee who have a new business item that they'd like to raise, we can do this first so members of the public don't have to wait through the whole agenda if they're here to raise a new topic. So if there's anybody on the call that wants to raise a new item that's not on the agenda tonight, now would be the time to do it. I don't see anything. Do you see anything, Kiran, or you?
I don't. I do not, no.
Okay. So we'll move on. Here's the order of business for tonight. DOT will take us through their presentation, and Samir will do the same for the co-naming discussion. Members of the Transportation Committee and members of PPSE can then ask questions or make comments, and I guess under the bylaws, any member of the board who's on the call can do that. I'll get $1 for any other member of the board that's on the call. After that, we'll take comments from the public. There's no time limit on public comments, but we do ask that you keep things succinct and avoid repetition. After all public comment has been received, we'll enter the committee business session where only committee members will discuss the matter with no further input from the public or the presenter unless requested by the chair. And finally, if appropriate, we'll craft a motion and take a vote on a resolution. And the vote here would be the Transportation Committee. After the last agenda item, we will adjourn the meeting. So with that, I saw Colleen. Do you want to introduce the speaker?
Hi, everyone. It's Colleen Chattagoon from City Department of Transportation. Thank you so much for hosting us this evening. I'd like to turn the meeting over to Borough Commissioner Danielle Zuckerman, who would like to say the introduction. So again, thank you so much for having us this evening.
Hi, everybody. It's good to meet you guys. As Colleen said, I'm Danielle Zuckerman, Borough Commissioner for DOT. I just started a couple of months ago, and I'm happy to make my first CB5 visit. But we're very happy to be talking to you today about our effort to put Park back in Park Avenue. You might recall that DOT is working with the team at Star White House to develop a vision for what will be newly widened medians along the corridor. We're coordinating closely with MTA as they undertake critical train shed work, and we're excited to be leveraging their project as an opportunity to enhance Park Avenue. the Grand Central Partnership and East Midtown Partnership have been extraordinarily helpful in connecting us with stakeholders along the corridor to make sure we're developing a design that's responsive to the unique needs along the corridor. And we're hoping to get your help in promoting opportunities to give feedback. We have a survey open, and we're finalizing the scheduling for a workshop that will almost certainly be February 9th at 6:30 at St. Bart's Church, but we'll follow up with a flyer to make sure that everyone has it and can help promote. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to my colleague, Nick.
Thank you, Danielle. Hi, all. My name is Nick Petnati. I'm Deputy Director of Urban Design here at New York City DOT. I'm leading the effort on behalf of the agency in close coordination with the Borough Office and many other units. We're really excited to be able to present where we're at. The team at Star White House has been phenomenal. They've spent much of the last several months really gathering the kind of baseline information and details that are needed to form the designs. We're not at the design stage yet. We're really close. We'll be back to you very soon to actually take you through what we're thinking. But we wanted to take this opportunity to brief the board, hear from you on what all your concerns are around the corridor, and let you know sort of where we're headed. I do want to give another shout out to Fred and Rob from Grand Central and East Midtown. They have been phenomenal partners here in helping us along the way. And we're really, I think, excited to show you where we're at, and to, again, hear from the board on what things we need to be paying attention to. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura Starr from the team, and she'll walk you through the presentation.
Okay, great. Well, we're very happy to be here, and I'm here with my colleague, Kristen Reardon, and also John Ward. So let's see, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, you can see the presentation now?
Yep.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to give we did the introductions. I'm going to give a quick project overview and a site overview and talk about some of the design opportunities, and then leave plenty of time for discussion, and we can talk about next steps.
Can you make it full screen? Is that possible?
Yes, right. Thanks for that reminder. Let's see what I can do here.
Control L
Let's
is the trick.
see. Yeah, okay. How's that? Is that better? Yeah.
Yep, that's fine. Thanks.
Okay. So your so the Park Avenue project is right in the middle of your community board. Here are the boundaries from 46th Street to 57th Street. What's striking to me about this map is how little green there is near Park Avenue, and what a great opportunity this is, as Danielle said, to put the park back in Park Avenue and widen that corridor of green down the middle. And we're very excited to hear from you about some of your ideas for that. The kind of light pink, like light peach color under that is where the train shed project is, that needs to be rebuilt under the avenue. So the rebuilding of the train shed gives the opportunity to widen Park Avenue and make it into an occupiable series of parklets. Okay, so it's a very significant green corridor. There's various landmarks along here, architectural showcase from all different eras. And of course, it connects crosstown to Central Park and to Bryant Park and to spaces, to Grand Central and spaces to the south. The corridor itself is really anchored at Grand Central, which obviously has an influx of people leaving it in the morning, going into Midtown and coming back in the afternoon. And then there's this core part of Park Avenue that has these landmark buildings, and then going further north, it's more residential. So we really want to make Park Avenue a significant part of the circuit from Fifth Avenue to Central Park and Bryant Park. So we've been studying the Fifth Avenue project, and one of the things that they mapped were these significant nodes along Fifth Avenue, where maybe special treatments can happen. And so we're thinking of how Park Avenue can tie into that with these crosstown connections, and looking at the opportunity for potentially significant artwork or plantings or gathering spaces along that to reinforce the sense of both the east-west and the north-south movement here. Here's the corridor itself. As you know, the first 3 blocks are under construction. And the project goals. So affirm the Avenue's role as a global corridor, as New York's global corridor, and create a linear oasis in the heart of Midtown. And really, this is for your community, and we want to hear from you what you think would make this the best possible oasis. And then, of course, there's the coordination with the MTA and the other agencies to marry the surface treatments with the construction, maintenance, and operations of the train shed roof. So in terms of the process, it's a year-long process. We're about halfway through it. We started in August. We've been doing stakeholder and community engagement all along. It's kind of crescendoing right at this moment as we try to get input as we embark on the design process here in the concept development. And then we'll be coming back to you when we develop the design ideas, and then the final report is due in September. I'm going to hand it to David Cuff for a minute to talk about the MTA's concerns for this, for the project.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I hope everybody can hear me okay. The Grand Central Terminal train shed is really a very important piece of infrastructure for the MTA and for all the Metro North riders, and for regional access. We have approximately 200,000 Metro North weekday riders that rely on what we call the Grand Central Artery, which is the viaduct, the tunnel, and then the train shed, which starts at 57th Street and goes down into 42nd Street into the terminal that most of the people can see. But before you get to the terminal, underneath Park Avenue is actually a series of interconnected bridges that come onto 2 levels there, and then above that, the 2 levels above that is Park Avenue, as we know, with the roadway, and also the medians itself. So almost all Metro North riders are using the Grand Central Artery coming in and out of the city. 750 daily GCT trains are being sorted on this this 2-level the train shed as they're coming into the terminal building, and again, all 3 lines are converging. All 3 lines, Hudson, Harlem, and the New Haven line, are all converging into the artery and coming into the train shed. So, as you can well imagine, as you probably well know, it's very important. Next slide, please. And so one of the problems is that it's deteriorating, and it's deteriorating rapidly. It's an old piece of infrastructure, and there has been a lot of deterioration that has been occurring over the years. And we have been trying through a priority repair program to try to stop some of the deterioration, but it's been difficult to keep up with the rate of deterioration and try to address it. And so, as you can see here, the rates have gone up despite our best efforts, and we really needed to. It's been recognized that we really needed to really do a bigger effort here and really address the problems that are occurring from the street, from a lot of water and other chemicals that are getting into the train shed and causing that deterioration. So we needed to take a different, more drastic intervention here to try to address the problems. Next slide, please. And so what is that? That's our comprehensive train shed roof replacement. This is how we're addressing problems. You can see this picture, I believe is in front of 270 Park Avenue. So what you need to do is you need to tear up Park Avenue, and that unfortunately meant taking the malls or the medians away, and then putting on top of the roof structure a state-of-the-art waterproof membrane to protect everything below there, and then also make sure that the water is not getting into the train shed and causing the damage to steel and concrete and other structures that are underneath there. Can you go back to the other slide, please?
Yeah, sorry.
And with that, we're complete full deck and stringer replacement. Those are within the roadways and sidewalks. And then after that's done, you put the roadway back, and then ultimately the medians will go back, which is obviously what we're here talking about tonight. Next slide, please. And so just to give you a sense of where we are in the process, we're finishing up Sector 1, which most people know as the work around 270 Park Avenue. It's that green U shape. That's going to be, it's mostly done. It's going to be finishing up soon. And then from there, we're going to do the sort of peachy color. That's Sector 2 that goes from 46th Street to 50th Street. That will be the next sector that we'll be attacking over in this current plan. That's the MTA's capital plan 25 to 29. We'll be addressing that. And then also with the new proposed building for 350 Park, there's potential there for the Sector 3 roof replacement in that section. So that's been identified. And then future roof replacements will occur from 53rd to 57th Street, and then also some of the side streets that you also see in the purple color as well. And I believe that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, David. Okay, so to take you through a little bit of the history of Park Avenue, this is what it looked like in the 1920s. It was symmetrical, and there was enough sunlight that it could feature lawns, and it had plenty of seating in these widened areas, and it was quite wide at that point, and had this lovely architectural curve that complemented the architecture of the time. Today, we all know what the medians look like. As the buildings get bigger and bigger, there's less light, and we have the shallow soils, and the medians got narrower in I think the 30s or 40s, and so that means what they're planted with are more short-lived species, a lot of annuals, and the trees have to be replaced fairly frequently because of the shallow soil conditions and wind and light and pollution. The evolution of the medians is really interesting. You can see here the train tracks underneath the original roof and the medians on top of that. And then here's the picture, the diagram of the picture I showed you before with the symmetrical wide kind of parterre gardens in the 20s. And then from 1927 to the present, this narrow version. And now here is a diagram of our DOT's proposed configuration for Park Avenue, which captures a northbound and a southbound traffic lane and annexes it to widen the medians. And also every other median block will have a turning lane, will be a turning lane block. So that's why in the future, these will not be symmetrical on every block. So every other block will have this more squiggly shaped garden, which I think gives a lot of potential for a sense of an interesting journey going north to south, south to north. So here's the existing typical median that's 20 feet wide. And the future median for the symmetrical full blocks is over twice as wide, 48 feet. And then the turning lane blocks are a little bit narrower. So here's a section through a typical existing median, and then you can see here the width, how it will look widened out, and then showing the lanes of traffic and then moving out to the sidewalks. We can come back to any of these illustrations if you have questions. We did an extensive site analysis, as Nick said, and one of the things we mapped were the public spaces associated with all the beautiful architecture along Park Avenue. And that's one of the urban design considerations, is how can these green spaces relate to existing public spaces and other green spaces along this whole corridor. Some of the blocks, 10 out of the 22 blocks, have garden features, so we mapped those. We just had a really interesting call with St. Bart's, hearing about their gardens and the importance of those. And we've been studying the gardens. As I said, the trees are challenged by lack of light and soil volume and wind. So we've been cataloging all of that and what all the trees are along here, how they're doing. Some leggy, some are doing poorly, fair. None of them are like superstars thriving in this challenging condition. And then each median right now is unique and uniquely planted and cared for. And the seasonal plantings are really remarkable along Park Avenue, as you all know. That's certainly something we are considering in the future design. So again, we did this extensive cataloging of all these gardens, and all of this cataloging will feed into the design opportunities. The most significant thing to know about the design opportunity and challenge is that basically what our project is, it's almost like a tray, a thin tray on top of which we can put these gardens. So that tray is on top of the train shed structure that David was talking about, which has to be hermetically sealed with waterproofing. And then we have the roadbed and the sidewalk, and then our tray that we're designing the paving and the planters and furnishings for. And then well, of course, on top of that, we have our planting soil and the plants. Some of the considerations we're thinking about is what are the unifying features of the corridor, and then how to have variations along each block so that it's responding to places like St. Bart's and Seagram's Building and other significant landmarks, and also the crosstown connections that might be relevant. There's also going to be interim conditions that we're looking at so that Park Avenue can look as good as it can during construction and be as hospitable to the community and usable during this interim period. So this is not our design. This is just a sketch that we are using as a placeholder that shows the kind of anatomy of what's possible on the corridor. So there are, of course, the crosstown connections, east-west, very likely bollards or some other type of pedestrian protection along that edge. And then these garden beds that will probably, for the most part, flank the walkway that goes through them so that pedestrians are buffered from the traffic on either side, although we are thinking about maybe some places where the vegetation breaks so that there can be views to significant plazas and other spaces along the corridor. That's something we're interested in hearing your thoughts about. So in addition to the planting, we're of course thinking about the materials, the program, the concessions that can go along here. We can't do any uses or concessions that require a sanitary connection because there's no place to connect that. We can't penetrate the train shed. So all the drainage, for example, is sheeting off east and west to the side streets. And that's much harder to do with a sanitary connection. And then, of course, the layer of the security, the lighting, the utilities. We're talking about various types of pedestrian lighting, maybe some specialty lighting. We're also going to be irrigating the plants. So Ken Smith, one of our colleagues, Ken Smith Workshop was commissioned by JP Morgan Chase to design the block that's in front of their new building. And this is an illustration of his design, just as an example of what is possible. So you can see how these new planters create enough soil depth to get trees to grow in them, and then would have built-in seating along there. So this is one idea of what could happen there that we're working from. And with that, why don't I stop sharing and we can have a discussion? And I'm happy to go back to any of those slides.
Thank you. That was helpful, very complete. I'll kind of get the ball rolling, and then we'll start recognizing people. Zool, you don't have to keep your hand up for 10 minutes. So let me go through some questions, and if you can't answer them right now, we can, come back to them. But Laura, just in terms of kind of design precursors, other kinds of projects that you were thinking about as examples of this, is it like the High Line? Are there other examples, domestically or internationally that you were thinking about?
Yes, we did actually an extensive cataloging of similar projects. We looked at some of the boulevards and LAs in Paris. We looked at project in, I could actually probably show those to you if you would like. We looked at a corridor in Detroit that has kind of braided paths going through a more natural feeling area. Certainly the High Line is a huge precedent for this because it's so linear and it's got world-class gardens, and everybody we've spoken with about Park Avenue thinks of it as a place that has, the potential for world-class gardens and a linear journey through them. And so that's what we're thinking about. The other thing that's relevant about the High Line is the width is somewhat similar to what we have here. And so we have to balance like the crowd of people who we imagine will be walking through our gardens against the size of the gardens. And, some blocks may have more compressed circulation, and other blocks may be more wide for both circulation and gathering. So we are thinking about all sorts of places.
And you mentioned, the JP Morgan frontage part, the Ken Smith design.
Mhm.
Can you just spend a minute and explain, sort of how is that its own thing with its own design? Is it informing the work that you're doing? How does that get coordinated with the?
Well, so I
ultimate
think,
product?
right. So we showed that because I think what's interesting about that is it has some very good ideas for what is possible. It's showing that you need those ends of the medians for crosstown circulation, and the idea of using the planter, integrating it into the buffer, into the security along the avenue so that the planter is protecting people on the interior of the block. So will our design look exactly like that? I don't know, but it will have maybe some similar, it'll be maybe in some situations a fairly similar diagram, but a different look. I don't know, Nick, do you want to talk about how committed the city is to that exact design?
Yeah, and I think it's definitely serving as a starting point for us, right? It's a project that has gone through a fair amount of review. I think we're working closely with MTA, JP Morgan to see how that fits into the overall vision for the 11 blocks. It may be that it ends up looking like you've seen and as it's been designed. I'm pretty sure that design came through this board a number of years ago. Or it may be that we're able to actually tweak it and evolve it so it's a little bit so it's more consistent with what we're seeing for the overall vision. I think we're still working through that piece, and we'll certainly keep the board updated as we get to that point. But there's a lot of really helpful information that we'll be able to glean from the process that went through previously.
And is Vornado going to be doing the same thing with the frontage in front of their new building? Or is each sector going to have a stamp from whoever owns the biggest building adjacent to it? Or
Mm.
I mean, I think our hope is that this vision is really going to be the thing that serves as the blueprint, right? And that we have this sort of overall consistent idea for what the corridor should be. And that, block by block, there may be things that are unique and respond to the adjacent context, whether that's 350 Park, 270, St. Bart's, Seagram, so on and so forth, but that it feels like a cohesive whole. That's really our goal. And one of the things that we have been doing is meeting with each of the property owners as stakeholders along the corridor at this stage to understand, what is important to them, what happens currently, how is it working, how is it not, so we can really filter that all into this overall set of feedback and start to come up with what that vision should look like.
okay. Just on the subject of each of these sectors, do we have any idea yet what the timing is for each sector to go into construction, and how long that takes to get through the whole 11 blocks? Or
David, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I mean, sector one is nearing completion. I think the fall is when it's going to be considered I think it's mostly complete now, but it's the fall, and then we would roll into sector two. And so that would be the 46 to 50th Street. So that's the one. We'd also be working with JP Morgan Chase CMT. We'll also be working with JP Morgan Chase on that one as a public-private partnership, and it is considered, it is part of the 25 to 29 capital plan. That's what we plan to do. Sector 3, Vornado needs to do a little bit more work on their building. Obviously, it has to come down. Then they have, clear the site and get it ready. So they're a little bit further along in the way. So the idea is that as we're hopefully, if everything works out, as we're kind of like winding down sector 2, then they'll be ready to go for sector 3. So we can kind of keep it sequentially and keep it moving up to 53rd Street, over the next few years here.
and just this public-private partnership. So is this MTA capital money that's then being delivered, the project is being delivered by the private partner? How are those structured?
Yeah, there's negotiations, and they provide a certain amount for the train shed replacement. So they are providing some amount as part of the negotiation, but really most of it is coming, a lot of it is coming from the capital plan, from what we are paying. The general public are paying them to complete the project using their construction contractor. So that part is, there's an efficiency there that they can just kind of continue to have the contractor on site and complete all the work without us having to do some kind of situation where we have a separate contractor and trying to work around them, and with lots of logistical headaches that could come from that.
Does the last sector have to wait until there's some major development going on adjacent to it, or that'll be a piece of?
You mean that
MTA
sector
work?
3 that I was showing in my slide?
Yeah.
Potentially it would be great if there were some other development that going on there that could contribute to it, but it's not foreseen to occur in this capital plan. So we'd have to see where we are with everything for the next capital plan. But it's definitely, it's part of the plan, as part of the train shed roof replacement. sort of the little bit of the unknown variable is as exactly how 350 Park is going to fit into everything. But once we know that better over the next few years, we can have a more set schedule for that sector 3 pieces and plus those additional side streets.
Mhm. Okay. Just on the sort of underpinnings for the lane layout on this, we got a question from a member of the public about whether there were any traffic studies that support this design, the reduction of the traffic lane, the need for turning lanes. What would the parking lane restrictions be? And, was all of that supported by some sort of traffic study?
But yeah, the short answer is yes. All of the traffic piece was analyzed as part of the Greater East Midtown rezoning as part of that EIS. So happy to delve into the specifics and whatnot, but that is something that was looked at in pretty close detail and is what resulted in the geometries that the team has been developing further.
Okay. I mean, I guess, when you come back on if there's another presentation from the technical package, as it looked like on your schedule, then, if we could get an understanding of what the underpinnings were for that.
Yeah, happy to do so. Absolutely.
Okay. Who maintains this space? Is this going to be Grand Central Partnership? How is the fund for Park Avenue involved? How does that all work? Or do we want to punt that until another time?
I'm glad we have Fred. We have Fred on the call.
Yeah.
Go, Fred.
Well, David, it's a great question. Actually, I think there's a very global understanding by all of the participants in any piece of the geography of the malls that there needs to be some coordination on maintenance and operation. And in fact, if you remember, and I'll use this opportunity to really thank Community Board 5 for their early support of this concept. You were one of the first signatories to the letter that we sent to City Hall back in the day to focus on this once we learned about the train shed project and that the fact that the malls would have to be removed. And then we all came together at one point, East Midtown, the fund, RPA, MAS, CB5, to talk about, well, what goes back. One of the big issues you'll remember is the fact that right now, this entire corridor is maintained, paid for, and programmed, although there's not a lot of programming beyond sort of holiday, some holiday decorations by someone different. We have 2, East Midtown has 1, the Park Avenue Mall has 3. Most of them are done by the private properties that are facing the malls. They fund their own contractors to do what they do. So while we actually just this week, we had a meeting with DOT and Star White House, us, East Midtown, and the fund for Park Avenue Malls to begin the discussion about what do we envision the structural organizational sort of how do we fix the problem? It isn't just about planting nice plants. It's about how do we sustain this vision into the future. And we're all on board with making that happen, but the details of that have not yet been determined. The agreements have not yet been determined, but I think we all come to the table understanding we need to participate in that so that the community has a long-term benefit from this amazing project. So more to come, and we'll come back to you with this as we discuss it further.
Okay, great. Yeah, we dealt with this, I guess, mostly on land use, which I think I mentioned to you, Fred, when we were doing Midtown South and the commitment of capital money for Broadway Vision, but where was the operating money going to come from? And, it's obvious that the maintenance of this plan is quite a bit different than the maintenance of the existing plan. So.
And David, I would just, as I completely agree with you. I think on the capital side, there are opportunities here, although there's no commitments beyond funding this amazing work of Star White House through the RFP that was done by DOT, which was funded by the East Midtown Governing Group. There is no further commitment at this time beyond this piece of the process. But while we know there may be opportunities for capital funds in the long term, whether it's through the administration directly, through the governing group, through the elected officials, whatever the combination of funding may be, none of it applies to operations. And so that's a critical component that is part of the discussion that we're having, and we will have further with the community board when we have a better sense of where we're headed.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll open it up to other members of the committee. I don't know that I can see. Oh, there we go. Great. Yeah, Zul, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you so much, David. I'll take 60 seconds. Thank you so much, Laura, for an exciting presentation, and Colleen and Daniel and Nick and Fred, everyone from DOT, MTA, the partnership. This is really terrific. It's very much in line with a lot of us have been talking about in regards to Broadway vision, turning Broadway from Union Square right up to Columbus Circle into a linear park. So this is wonderful thinking. Green space, more clean air, better public transportation, pedestrian safety, programming, artwork, as much green as possible. It's very reminiscent to me of a project we did in the late 70s, Upper Broadway, the Broadway Mall Art Project. And so some of these things, take decades from concept, but with the residential conversions that's happening, certainly in CB5, but all around town, we know clean air, more green space, pedestrian safety. Thanks so much. This is a very exciting start. I'm very interested to see that survey and to fill that out right away and to attend the workshop at St. Paul. So thanks so much.
Great. Well, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
It's going to be February already.
Yeah.
Libby, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm the Parks, Public Spaces and Environment Chair, so my questions are really focused on all things plants and environment. Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm very excited about this. I have comments that I'll try to save, but I've got questions about the water seems to be really focused, considering this is sort of the initiating factor for this. I was curious about stormwater capture, permeable pavement, elements of tree roots that can absorb more water, and sort of what considerations have gone into optimize for sort of cloudburst, and how much exploration of that is maybe being incorporated into this project.
Okay, so first of all, remember I said we have to think of this as a tray. Like think of it like a kitchen tray, and nothing could go through the kitchen tray, right? So no permeable paving.
So I'm thinking of it more in terms of down in FIDI, there are benches that also have like stormwater capture there just to slow the process into the sewer system. So it's sort of like the core elements of that.
Right. Okay. So the garden beds themselves, we're going to make them deep for the trees. So like 2 to 3.5 feet deep. That will absorb all the stormwater that falls on them. But I think it's very unlikely there's no earth below our project to put the rainwater into. Do you know what I'm saying? There's no spongy, earthy soil under us. Am I answering your question?
I'm thinking more like gray infrastructure versus green, other than like, have you considered the trees themselves that are capable of absorbing more? There are certain trees that are able to absorb more rainwater than others.
Well, so we're really focused on what will survive here.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? It's not like, if we had more like a typical park project on real soil with sunlight and not tall buildings around it. So I would say we're going to do our best to do all the things that you said. But I think of all of our projects, this one is maybe the most challenging on that particular axis. I don't know, Kristen, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think I agree. I mean, of course, we're also considering all our trees to be native plants and to encourage like, natural absorption within the garden beds, as Laura said, but we are contending with an existing stormwater system that needs to be maintained, which is actually pushing all of the drainage to the side streets. So there's really no collection of water, not really a lot of collection of water on Park Avenue itself. So we need to maintain that because we need to, keep the shed dry and avoid the leaks and issues that are happening with the shed currently. So,
but I will just say that the big move here is a very sustainable move, which is to take away 2 lanes of traffic to convert those into garden beds, is absorbing a gargantuan amount of water that would otherwise be carrying all sorts of car crud and trash into the stormwater system, right? So it's just like the big kind of major move that DOT is doing is actually a super green move.
Oh, I think the plan is amazing. I just was curious if that was, I have additional questions, David. I don't know if I'm allowed to ask them.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Other people can go if they have different questions, though. I don't want to hog all of it, but
Hog away. You're the
okay.
co-chair.
So I think that it's great to hear that there will be a ongoing maintenance plan that is in development to make sure that it can be sustained. But I was curious, just to clarify, it does sound like the hope is that it will be a consistent design plan versus a little bit like patchwork. I just wanted to confirm that that was an accurate understanding of the overall landscape visual sense of place.
I would say, right. So I would say the way, like the High Line has some consistent, it's got the linear paving and the furniture, some of the furniture is very consistent, but within it, you might go from a birch forest to an Amelanchier area to pines, you know what I mean? How it transforms. It's a journey that we're aiming for something like that has unifying features, which would be the curb and very likely the street ends that give it its identity. And then in the middle, there's room for some variation. So it's not going to be patchwork, but it will not be fascist.
Okay. And that is good to hear. And then I'm sure that there's been some thought given to this too, or will be, but I was curious if there's any more details at the time about looking at the trees that currently exist. They're sort of like color blocked, but if tree species were the colors that you're blocking. But I was curious, what's one of the nicest things about New York in spring is that you have sort of sequential blooming. But I was wondering, to make this sort of a year-round space, if you've given consideration to like the off season when it's not just spring, to make it like a nice place to go sit on many of the very warm winter days, this week excluded, to get more people out and using space during winter. If you'd given consideration to that, and maybe seating that would be like friendly to sit on during a colder time, and then also the trees to help encourage that, especially when it's not in direct sunlight. How to make it more enjoyable while still balancing.
That is exactly what we're thinking about as the landscape architects. So I hope to come back to you with, with that. And when Fred gets the maintenance people together and we're allowed to use some wood on the benches, that will be really great for comfort on a day like today, as opposed to stone or precast materials. So I'm glad Fred is part of our equation here. Not equation. Fred is our operations and maintenance leader, our visionary.
But yeah,
we have wood in
seasonal.
Pershing West. We do have wood in Pershing West, as you know. So it's working. I mean, it's a problem, but we deal with it. It's fine.
Right.
And then I just have one last question. I, not being on the transportation committee, I know this comes up a lot for a lot of the folks here, but is there a different way to have pedestrian safety that is less like that? I know we need safety for bollards, but I love that the outside protection is sort of this built-in way that's really natural feeling. Is there a way to explore that further, or is this really the only option?
Well, I'll say that is something that we are definitely asking the team to take a more in-depth look at. There's an entire task that we put in the RFP around security design because we want to figure out ways to do it better. Obviously, bollards at the intersections are kind of the best way to go just because it provides the most amount of circulation space, right? While still providing the kind of necessary protection. And it is something that we're going to continue to have conversations with our colleagues at NYPD Counterterrorism to see exactly what is necessary, what makes sense, how can we balance that against, what actually feels good out there. Again, the Ken Smith design at 270 Park did use the heftier planter walls as a way to provide security while still blending in that kind of natural take. And I think that's a cue that we're looking to build upon and see how that works across the whole corridor. But it's definitely a very valid point.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Libby.
Samir?
Yeah, I'll go one at a time. In terms of construction staging and all that stuff, how much of the roadway will be ripped up when you're doing construction? Is it just the median or the whole thing? Or are we talking about the redoing the part that's already under construction?
So functionally, and David, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but in theory, the entire road ultimately has to get ripped up because the train shed sits beneath both the median, the actual travel ways, the sidewalks in many cases. It gets wider as you're further south and slightly narrow as you're getting closer to 57th Street. How that happens, the means and methods of what that looks like is something that, we'll have to work very closely with the contractor. It involves maintenance and protection of traffic. That's probably what you saw around 270 Park Avenue, right? We took the medians out. We actually put traffic vehicles where the medians were previously to allow the construction to happen right adjacent to 270 Park. Then obviously the road goes back and we can then think about where the cars go from there. But that sort of song and dance is something that's going to be looked at very closely in how this gets phased from a construction perspective. Sorry, my son says hi. But yeah, ultimately the entire sort of stretch it needs to be torn up. And again, David from MTA, please correct me if I've misstated anything on that front.
I mean, you got a pretty road for 270 Park Avenue. What you saw out there is probably going to be the same thing, but just on a slightly larger scale because now we're doing the 4 blocks. I mean, it's tried to be as staged as possible, so you don't take out the whole thing. Take out the pieces that you're doing at each time. So there will be some phasing of construction zones. But this is a pretty significant project, so there will have to be quite a lot of area taken out for the train shed project on
Right.
Park Avenue.
And then between some of the designs, I feel like the outcome in terms of the number of car lanes was differing. How many lanes are we expecting at the end? Is it just removing one in each direction from the travel lane and then keeping the parking lane? So it would have, I guess.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. And apologies if there was some confusion on a few of the diagrams there. There might have been a little bit of inconsistency, but the idea is one travel lane in each direction will be removed to expand the medians, obviously allowing for those turning lanes on the blocks that are needed. And then you have 2 travel lanes and then still the curbside lane.
Okay. And then the last question is, I know when I've seen some of these center running park medians in other cities, sometimes they put a bike lane in the middle. Are there any plans for a bike lane either in the median or on flanking the median or on the sides of the street for Park Avenue?
So that is something that we're still actively looking at. We actually presented earlier in the month to CB6 and the same kind of question came up. Again, we're starting with the geometry that we got approved and that was analyzed as part of the EIS. And then are looking at sort of all of the modes and how that plays out. So we'll certainly be back to you with more detail on that front, but not settled yet.
Great, thank you. I'll reserve everything else for comments. Thank you, David.
John Klein?
Cool. I think I have one question because Samir just asked a question that I had, and I think this one was already answered, but it sounds like we with this change we are able to add some more soil and kind of like footing for the trees. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
It's interesting. We can't have water going through the slab, so we have that constraint, but the structure under where we're building is pretty beefy, so it can hold the weight of sandy loam soil, of good garden soil. So yes, we're increasing
Cool.
the soil. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Catherine Ellington, you had your hand up. Did you mean to put it down or?
Well, a lot of, I do have a question. So thank you,
Okay.
David, for noticing. So my question has to do with, I'm pleased to hear that all the partners who have been working previously on this stretch are sort of aligning and forming. But I wonder at the end of all of this, will there be some sort of conservancy or some sort of collaborative organization where the public-private partnership can exist and take public input as to shaping programming around this wonderful space, that's going to have like more pedestrian room and room for more imagining? And will the sculptures that we see that the Fund for Park Avenue sort of puts out, will that still move through this space in the same way, or so?
Could I take that one, Laura?
Sure,
and Nick?
Fred, please. Yeah, please.
So, Catherine, it's a great question. Let me say this. So, the sculptures are not merely Park Avenue Fund projects. We have the sculptures in the malls we maintain. The original goals of this, before we got to the point where this RFP had been issued and Star White House has started work on it, really demanded sort of 4 components. One was that there would be wider malls. One was that there would be power to the malls. Right now, as you know, all of you know, the only power really to the malls that's being provided is through overhead wires across Park Avenue from the GCP poles, so that there's power in those malls. Third is water and irrigation, which is a critical component to really sustaining the beautiful plantings that we hope to see. And the fourth was weight bearing, that the malls needed to have weight bearing capacity so that art and other uses could be sustained on the base of the mall. This is sort of the icing on the cake of the train shed project, right? We talk about it internally as the icing on the cake. So we absolutely support the idea of different components. And I think this is one of the challenges Star White House has, which is not everybody wants the kiosk, not everybody wants art, not everyone wants a seating area, but at the end of the day, there has to be this thread of all these amazing pieces of what the public can enjoy. The idea of who is the centerpiece of the maintenance and operation, right now we're dealing with 3 entities that do report and respond directly to the community, which are 2 bids and the Fund for Park Avenue Malls. And there's, no matter how it ends up, whether it's in a 4th independent entity, which is certainly a possibility, or it's one of us, or it's some agreement between all of us, we would absolutely, since we report, you're on our boards, we report to the community, we serve the community would be an active participant in what the ultimate programming would look like. The real issue is, what foundation are we building for the different types of programming that might be available? And that's in the hands of our amazing designers now.
And I'll say that's definitely something we've heard multiple times already, and I think are really looking at cohesively across the corridor on how do we incorporate that public art program and what that looks like in a
We'd
more
love to see
permanent
more
way.
art on Park Avenue. I mean, right now we only maintain 2 of them. So that's where the 2 pieces of the art that we work with the city end up, because we don't control the others, but really no one controls the others. So this is, in addition to the beautification element of this, it's going to be great to have some understanding of how we could bring more to Park Avenue and this part of the city and our neighborhood in East Midtown that we do now, because there's no one place to turn to make any one thing happen. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, that's what, so I just wanted to signal, that was what my question was around. How do you, as you're moving through this process, create organizational structure to hold all the partners that are here in the future for the long haul?
Yes.
So thank you David.
Yeah, yes. And I would just add that we've been very fortunate that the stakeholders along Park Avenue in this corridor of the geography of this work, both the train shed and the re-envisioning of Park Avenue, have been incredibly supportive of this effort and this vision. They put private dollars into the original study for this. They're meeting with the designers now, and there's a certain level of trust they have with the three entities that are at least at the table right now, because they've worked with them for so many years. So we don't see a problem there, but we also don't have the answers yet. But everyone is really looking to come up with something that works.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Catherine.
you.
Thanks, Fred. Todd, you're up.
Thank you, and thank you for this wonderful proposal. I support the comments of many of my colleagues. Of course, many of you know me. I'm a longtime member of the Parks and Public Places Committee. Just a few quick questions. One of the things that you showed in your presentation, I believe, was a graphic that showed the state of the deterioration of the current physical infrastructure related to the entire project. How confident are you that the rate of deterioration, given climate change and the beating that it's taking, is going to increase and skyrocket your costs and your time frame? If you could speak to that, and whether there are built into your planning stages that issue. That's the first thing. The second thing is, it's hard to see the big picture here. What percentage of the 3 stages are actually funded at this point? I thought I heard that the first 2 stages have funding pretty much lined up from various sources, whether through the city or from others. And the third thing, can you speak to your priority as you craft the new parks and public spaces of how you plan to deal with disabled access? Because the current Park Avenue is just very difficult in that regard. Could you speak to that issue in any way? Thank you.
So maybe working backwards, I'll say we definitely want to make sure that the design that we're proposing for this 11-block stretch is fully accessible. We'll be looking at installing new pedestrian ramps at all of the intersections, making sure that slopes are compliant, looking at spaces for companion seating, making sure any of the features that we're proposing, whether it's a drinking fountain, any of the programming, all of those kinds of things, we would make sure that we're complying with ADA at a bare minimum, and really looking to go beyond that from a best practices perspective. We're not there yet in terms of the details, but that's something we'll pay close attention to as we come back and start to present those proposals to you. For the other questions, David, from MTA, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think they're mostly in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, I mean, so as I mentioned before, Sector 1 is part of the 20 to 24 capital plan, so it was funded through that. Again, that's a portion, that's a U-shaped portion around JP Morgan Chase's building. Sector 2 is considered to be part of our current capital plan, the 25 to 29 capital program. So we have, I think, $1.1 billion in that plan for train shed work. And then the Sector 3 is not part of the capital plan. And so at this point, it would be envisioned to be part, included as part of future capital plan, particularly the 30 to 34 capital plan. I mean, how confident are we? That's our plan going forward. I mean, things change, things always happen, things like inflation occur and congestion pricing. Remember when it was paused? So anything can happen, but we are proceeding ahead at this point, and that's our plan for attacking these three sectors of the train shed. In terms of the rate of deterioration, I think one thing I should just point out is that yes, we do have a plan for the train shed roof replacement. But that does not mean we stop doing priority repairs. So we continue to do our priority repair work throughout the train shed, knowing where, I'm not an engineer, but the engineers know where the more important locations are to go to, and they have a plan. That plan has been continuing. It was in the 2024 program. It's going to continue in the 25 to 29 program to continue to try to work on the areas that we know we're not going to be able to get to, in the next 5 years or so. So between that and the work that we're doing with the train shed, that's how we're hoping to address this issue that's really obviously come to the forefront for us.
That's great. I would urge you in our district needs statement. I mean, the last third of it is not funded in the capital plan. So I would hope that the DOT and all these other groups would work with Community Board 5 and make sure that we know when you need us to put in our word and advisory power on getting you the money that you need. Because this is one of those things, the Park Avenue corridor, we cannot let it deteriorate. And this is a once in a century opportunity to improve it and keep our city state of the art. Thanks to all for your efforts.
Thanks, Todd. Joel?
Sorry, are we going to do a separate comments section, or should I add my comment in now?
You can add your comment in now.
My comment is just I love the design, and Laura, I love the word squiggly describing the design. I just feel like that embodies this pedestrian space that's sort of separate, and it kind of slows things down in the middle of a busy city. That's my comment. I loved it. My question is I did like you asked for feedback on the idea of viewpoints, looking at different buildings from the area through the plantings, and I think that's great. I have a question about views, and that's, are you giving any consideration to the overall north-south view shed? In other words, when I'm crossing Park Avenue at 57th Street and I look all the way down, it's a magnificent view. If you start putting in big bunches of trees, I'm not going to have that view anymore, or it won't be the same. Is that under consideration to sort of protect that long, I don't know what you call it, longitudinal view shed?
Well, we have to do a lot of studies of that to get the cumulative effect, because keep in mind, Park Avenue, those malls have always been symmetrical, but our malls are not symmetrical because every other mall has the squiggle. So we really have to study the overall effect, but we definitely want a significant overall effect, whether you're looking north or south. And we also want the east-west effect, so if you're coming from Rockefeller Center, we were just talking to St. Bart's today. If you're coming from the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree, maybe you get a glimpse of the St. Bart's Christmas tree, or you're coming from the galleries on 57th, maybe you get this hint of sculptures to come on Park Avenue. So yes, the view corridors are really critical. I'm hoping the timing works so that we can do mock-ups of that and maybe bring them back to workshop them with the community.
Thank you.
Charlie.
Hey everyone. First, I just wanted to thank you all for this excellent presentation. And I also just want to say I appreciate this efficiency of presenting to both the Transportation and Parks committees at the same time, because those are the two committees I'm on. My question is, I'm wondering why only 2 car lanes are being removed. And it sounds like 2 parking lanes are being maintained in the heart of Midtown. Particularly because there are 2 scheduled increases in congestion pricing on the way. The first is less than 2 years from now in 2028, and then there will be another increase in 2031. So this Park Avenue redesign strikes me as a very forward-looking project. I just heard it described as like a once-in-a-century sort of thing. And from the timeline you laid out, it sounds like it's going to take many years to complete all 3 of these sectors, plus a 4th down the line. So I think it would be unfortunate if the resulting street design didn't, anticipate a very near future version of Manhattan that has significantly fewer cars, less need to store private vehicles on public property. So my question is, why not remove at least 1 parking lane in favor of a wider sidewalk or even a wider linear park?
So I really appreciate the comment and the question. I think it's a really interesting point, right? Obviously, the thinking about what the future traffic implications are going to be for Park Avenue in context of congestion pricing is something we are taking a close look at. One of the things that the EIS actually mandated is once there's a certain square footage of development that actually gets built, there is a traffic monitoring program that has to be put in place. So this is something that the agency is going to be taking a really close look at. I think there has been sort of an interesting, at least anecdotally, I am a landscape architect at the agency, by the way, not a traffic engineer, so I don't want to speak out of turn. But there's been an interesting increase in the number of for-hire vehicles that are servicing the area, for example. So like the overall traffic impact post-congestion pricing, it's still something we're looking at, right? Lots of really interesting data coming out on that front. I think your point is fair, and I think we will have the team start to think about what does a future condition look like, where maybe the design does get to expand. I think it's also something that we're looking at in context of other modes, right? The question was asked around a bike lane before. Maybe it's to accommodate the sort of additional travel demand in that respect. So I don't think it is off the table. I think we, again, have sort of tasked the team with looking at the geometry that we got approved through the EIS. I think it's very fair to think about what that kind of forward-looking condition is, especially given the length of the construction that's going to look at. But we also want to make sure we're providing what that vision can be and that it is adaptable to the future. So I think it's a fair point, something we can continue to take a look at. But we also want to make sure the team is moving forward and coming up with some designs for the corridor too.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer.
Yeah, I think part of it's terminology also, though, because this issue came up on a couple of the bus lane proposals where, the lane is identified as parking, but it's much more controlled than that. So, nobody is pulling up there for, 8 hours or, there are a lot of missions that have to be accomplished on that curb in front of those huge buildings. So thanks. Thanks, Charlie. Athena.
Thanks, David. I echo my colleagues' sense of appreciation for everyone here presenting tonight. This is very exciting. My question is around how you anticipate the foot traffic mix to evolve over time, because when I go to that area, it's always striking to me how much more diverse the foot traffic on 5th is over Park Avenue. And when I think of Park Avenue, it's a lot of, people who work in those buildings immediately adjacent. So with this, with the new corridor in there, do you expect more tourists, more residents, more mixed foot traffic there?
I think the short answer is yes, right? Like we're going to be creating a space that people can now occupy that they couldn't before. And that it is to some extent a new potential open space for a community that I think, as Laura was mentioning earlier in the presentation, is really lacking in green space in that respect. So I think obviously we can't predict the future, so we'll see. The proof will be once it's actually built, but there's a huge office population. There is now a growing residential population. I think we've been talking to some of the individual stakeholders around, what does Park Avenue at night look like compared to during the day, where you've got the, the lunch traffic and the office workers that are going to now have a space to go and actually enjoy a meal, compared to the folks that may now be experiencing this in the evening hours. And what does that mean from a programming perspective? Opportunities for concerts, for lighting, for a whole bunch of different things, I think are now with this kind of design open up those possibilities, and I think will encourage a whole range of different foot traffic. But we'll have to wait and see, I guess.
Yeah, so maybe to follow up to that, like, have you considered, or at what stage of the designing process will you consider the surrounding infrastructure that needs to also be put in place to accommodate the mixed foot traffic? So one example, like our district cares a lot about, is public bathrooms. Like, we don't want the parks to be so wonderful, and then folks come and only people who have a badge to swipe into the surrounding buildings can like actually enjoy the space in a like longer time period. So like I guess, have that been considered already, or like at what point should that conversation take place?
So I that's something that the team is definitely taking a close look at now. Obviously, if there are top concerns for the board, we're happy to hear them. I will caution, public bathrooms is definitely a challenging one, purely because of the train shed infrastructure that exists here. We have very limited access to the sanitary sewers that we need to take the waste away, at least for kind of that kind of permanent infrastructure to go in as part of the capital project. That's not to say that the city isn't looking at other means for how to accommodate restrooms, right? The administration, the mayor announced a new RFP for bathrooms and funding associated with that. So this is definitely a piece that is top of mind. Again, the physical infrastructure part is a little bit more challenging along Park Avenue just because of the train shed structure that exists. But we are looking at power, we're looking at water, we're looking at, again, some of the things that Fred had mentioned to really support the kind of programming and activity that we want to see along these malls.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Athena. I mean, we did try on land use to get, for instance, the Vornado project to provide a public restroom in their bonusable public space, but they wouldn't commit to it. So, it would be good to see the private partners on this step up as well. That's my ad for the evening. Kieran.
Hey, thanks, David. Thanks, everyone, for your time. I think very exciting. It'll be beautiful when it's done. My question was regarding construction logistics. Wanted to ask if any of the work done between 270 and 383, where the block was closed, if that's informed any forward-looking thoughts on Park Avenue. Clearly, with the width you guys are talking about, it almost sounds like, extending the median and the width you need to go in terms of repairing the train shed. Are we talking about an entire side of Park Avenue being closed down?
So I think to answer the first part of your question, there's definitely been a lot of lessons learned from 270 Park in terms of how that was phased and what that looks like. I think we are not yet there in terms of what the maintenance and protection of traffic, how that's going to actually play out for the Sector 2 work, right? That's funded and that will be coming next. Although I think we're not necessarily that far away, and we'll certainly, I'm sure, I don't want to speak on behalf of David and MTA, but I'm sure that'll be something that we discuss in more detail with the board as we get a little bit more specific on that. But there will need to be that kind of balancing or dance of, moving the cars over so we can actually excavate the roadway, rebuild the structure below, then putting the cars back, then doing the other side of the road. So it'll be that kind of phased work, sort of block to block in all likelihood. But
yeah, Dick, I think that's right. There will be that phase. There'll be movement of traffic lanes like you saw before with 270. Again, just as I said before, just sort of like on a larger scale with that, going from 46th to 50th Street.
No, thank you. And my question, just to be clear, is with consideration not just of vehicular traffic, but also foot traffic, the office population, and as you mentioned, the increasing residential population in East Midtown. So thank you.
Yes, and of course, sorry, don't mean to all of the traffic modes will obviously be taken a look at during that piece.
Robert Tuckman.
Thank you, David, and thanks everyone for the great presentation. Echo the comments that others have made about how excited I am about this, and in particular the opportunity to reclaim some street space for pedestrians. My question stems from seeing a picture in the slide deck, the condition of the avenue back in the 1920s. When I was not back then, but there were bigger, islands, but they were surrounded by 1920s cars, which were smaller, slower, and, fewer in number. And so when I think about these islands and imagine, 21st century cars going by them, the impact, is of that is a little bit sort of worrying to me. So my question is, have you all thought much about sort of ways of maximizing the impact of reclaiming the space, whether it's through, ways of calming the traffic around the islands or stitching the islands together in different ways? In other cities I've been to, some of the boulevards are sort of a lot longer and more cohesive. So let me just kind of throw it to you with that broad question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely something that we're taking a look at. I think that some of the lessons learned from the Ken Smith design, right? Thinking about what the buffer along the road looks like and how we can make that substantial and really sort of have it feel like you are immersed in this landscape, as opposed to seeing the sort of larger vehicles of today traveling by and sort of what that looks like. I think we're definitely paying really close attention to the intersections and making sure we can shorten crossings as much as possible, provide for hopefully that median to median connection, which will be a whole different way of circulating along Park Avenue compared to what exists now. Making sure that still accommodates the vehicles and the turns that need to be made, right? We still want ambulances and fire trucks and whatnot to get through. So we'll be looking at that from that perspective, but really focusing on this as a much more pedestrian-centered approach to the design and what that experience looks like. Hopefully that addresses your concern. Again, we're also still developing the design, so that's something that we can take back and continue to sort of tweak and see what that looks like over time.
Just glad to hear that you all are thinking about it. So thank you.
You got it.
Okay, so the last hand I've got up is Christopher, and then if anybody else has any final questions or comments from the committee, put your hand up and we'll deal with those. Go ahead, Christopher.
Okay, hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, just using a different microphone than the earphones. So I don't want to seem ungrateful. Thank you so much for the presentation and the opportunity to ask the questions. As a user of the space and looking at the presentation, much with the last comment, the thing that really stood out to me between the 1920s picture and like the sketches of what you have today was that like really broad space through the middle for pedestrians to walk. And I think this is a super high priority for me. And then also the no parking. Because in the 20s picture, there's clearly no parking going on. And in the sketches, there's no parking going on. And I know we just talked about parking, so I don't want to get into it too much. But I do think, again, that one way to remedy the mistakes of the previous century in relation to car-centeredness is to make sure that parking is minimized as much as possible, just to give us as much space as possible for the pedestrian. And then I guess just as a question, how much is this project going to serve as a template, or like how much are you using as a template for the other half of Park Avenue that's, much closer to me and the kind of rest of it that goes up to 96th Street? Like once you have this stuff figured out, are you thinking about it in this way that like you can use this in a modular way or another way to like deal with the, the part that goes from 17th Street to Grand Central, and then the part that goes from, I don't know, the 50s up until 96th Street where the train finally comes out of the hole? That's my question.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I do think that we certainly hope that this will serve as a template, at least moving north. I think south of Grand Central and Park Avenue South is a little bit more challenging, right? That the medians get super narrow at certain portions and whatnot. Not to say that we can't borrow some of these, but there's some interesting challenges on that front. Obviously, the study that went into the East Midtown rezoning is really what gave us the template for what we're able to pursue in these 11 blocks. We would need to continue that study north and sort of see how that plays out. But I think that there, hopefully this will and can really serve as that template. And we'll need advocacy from, the board, from other folks to continue to push forward on that front as we move beyond the train shed reconstruction. Obviously, the unique piece about this is the train shed, right? That's given us the real opening to say, hey, let's figure out what we put back here, and we're actually going to build it. So that's the one caveat I'll say, but it's definitely a thing that I think will be helpful moving forward.
Okay, last call for any members of the committee that have comments or questions. Samir?
Yeah, I'll just rattle off my comments really quickly. One, I wish we were doing more in terms of reducing car traffic and getting rid of more lanes of traffic. Two, I know Broadway did a block by block approach and it was kind of a mess. And now they're moving towards a more corridor wide solution. So maybe it makes sense to do something more similar here. Three is if we're going to rip up the entire roadbed from property line to property line eventually for this project, I think we should make the sidewalks much bigger. That way we could potentially have sidewalk dining instead of roadway dining. And then I like the idea of the integrated seating into the medians. Reminds me a lot of the Hudson River Park. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, if any of the attendees have comments or questions, now would be the time. Jim?
I will just say that I'm on a community board 1, and I love community boards 5. I love all what you're saying about reducing the parking lanes, and the whole value system here is really inspiring. So thank you.
Jim, you can go ahead.
Hi, I think I'm unmuted.
Yes.
It's Jim Wright. I'm a CB5 resident, architect, and urban designer. And I have a handful of questions, but I'll try to keep it brief here. Looking forward to the workshop as a way to get into more of the details. And I appreciate coming early in the process while it's still conceptual. So, ideas can be tested, various alternatives. That is one thing I'm sort of missing from the presentations right now is sort of an alternatives analysis that perhaps looked at, as Samir was just suggesting, widening the sidewalks on both sides. I'm assuming, looking at the MTA diagrams, that the repair is not just from curb to curb, but from property line to property line. And if that is the case, one could really look at how those sidewalks function on both sides. There's a lot of plazas associated with commercial buildings along that corridor that presumably could be better designed if they were extended into the sidewalks. I would really look at also, even if parking lanes are maintained on both sides, at the minimum having curb extensions going out at the crosswalk so that the crossing distance could be reduced substantially. And I have a philosophical question. I'll pose this and maybe open up some discussion. Right now, that I see as sort of two major pedestrian traffic generators. One is the office buildings, mostly offices. I am not even sure that there's any residential buildings along this corridor section we're looking at. Obviously, that changes as you go north of 59th Street, but there's the daytime office workers that are sort of 8 to 6 in terms of their pedestrian use of the space, and mostly probably midday when lunches occur. And then there's the commuting traffic that happens at the morning and evening rush hours. I'm not really aware that there's very much evening pedestrian traffic along here. So I guess my question is a better place to put wider pedestrian usage in a median that's disassociated from the buildings on both sides? Or would it be better positioned on the sidewalks on both sides? And pointing out, as you get closer to Grand Central at 46th Street, the conduit to Grand Central is directly aligned with the existing sidewalks. It's not the median. There's a tunnel that goes through the Helmsley building to Grand Central. So I very much appreciate seeing a little bit more on the sort of pedestrian traffic patterns by time of day to sort of rationalize a wide pedestrian space in the middle of the street rather than along the existing sidewalks. Also point out, just from a traffic point of view, as you go north of 57th Street, the 3 lanes of moving traffic on the southbound side will be squeezed down to 2 lanes. So there's a potential for a fair amount of congestion at that point. As I've gone through that area, there is a fair amount of vehicular traffic north of 57th Street. So I'm hoping that we'll see more of the vehicular traffic studies too at the workshop. And finally, and I think this is coming, but I think that programming in the center medians, whatever they end up becoming, is going to be absolutely critical. And I just had the opportunity of looking again at Holly White's very interesting documentary from 1979, The Social Life of Small Urban Spaces. Laura, I'm sure, and Nick, you're quite aware of that work from Holly White, but closely looking at how people use spaces at different times of day, different seasons, whether it's adjacent to buildings or not, if it's isolated. I think it's really critical that be worked into this study to really enrich it and make sure it really works as the best as it possibly can for everyone who's using it. What I would really hate to see is a lot of effort going into a mall that ends up not being used very much. So I think it's really critical that kind of human use of the space be really carefully integrated into the studies. And I'll leave it at that. I've thrown out some questions, some philosophical thoughts, and I look forward to the workshop. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Is there any part of this that anybody wants to respond to, or we'll pick it up in the next presentation, or?
I mean, I don't, yeah, I want to be respectful of time. I know we've taken up quite a bit. I think there's some great points. Certainly we echo the sentiment around the programming, and that's something that we're really looking very closely at. I think we're happy to talk further at the workshop around some of the studies and all of those things. Again, we are here early to hear these kind of points and these feedback to help inform the design. So we really appreciate that time and are happy to follow up in more detail.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks very much. This is, I think, one of the best presentations we've had in the committee. I appreciate, the work from Danielle and Colleen and Nick and Laura and Fred and David to present all of this, and appreciate the meaningful questions from both committees as well. So we'll hopefully a number of us will be on the February 9th session, and we look forward to the next round on this. So thanks very much.
Thank you for the time. Really appreciate it. Another shameless plug. Please fill out the survey. Danielle put a link in the chat, and we'll see you at the workshop.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
everybody.
Bye.
Okay. Item 2. Samir has a presentation and background on this issue of placing co-named blades on street signs. And so for many of you, it's a new issue, and we will be presenting the background on that as well. Okay,
There
go
we go.
ahead.
Yep. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my slides. There are a lot of slides, and I will try to get them through them quickly so we can discuss. But yeah, so as David mentioned, we're talking about street co-naming. I'll go into some of the background, and then we will go into some of the recommendations. So street co-naming basically adds you can see an example right there in our district. It adds a secondary honorary street sign. To be clear, the primary street name is unchanged on Google Maps. It'll be West 33rd. Everywhere else will be West 33rd. If you said Muhammad Ali Way to a cab driver, they would say, what the hell are you talking about? It is purely decorative. It requires city council approval. The Department of Transportation installs these signs. And there are sign constraints that limit placement and final approval. There's a nice little article you can read about it if you want. Okay. So in terms of the naming regulations at the city level, basically the way it goes is the city council has to pass a bill that would actually become the law to add the street co-naming, and then DOT would go ahead and install that sign. So I'm just looking at the chat. Okay, not relevant to me. So it goes through a community board. Typically, not all community boards look at it. We'll talk about that. And then the city council member would introduce a bill. The council would pass the bill. The mayor would sign it or veto it, I guess. I don't know if they do that very frequently. And then the DOT would install it. Signs would have to be limited to 36 characters and must use existing poles. And the city council requires that honorees be deceased individuals and that they've demonstrated lasting positive community impact. So you can see here a little bit more of the process and the rules that I found online. So that talks about the 36 character limit, the how many signs are going to be installed, the ceremony, all of that kind of stuff. And I'll share the slides later if anyone wants to read through them in detail. So CB5, we established a moratorium on new street blades installations in November of 2009. We had a few come to us that I'll talk about. One was Friars Way in 2004. There were some comments from board members that simply said that they think street blades are a stupid idea and they give city council members something to do instead of, I guess, what they thought they should be doing, and that we don't want to get into the habit of giving out street blades to every organization that asks for one. And then there was Jerry Orbach Way, 53rd and 8th. This was in 2007. Ms. Orbach persuaded members of CB5 to endorse the ceremonial renaming after CB4 said they would not do so. And I assume that went up. So co-namings are permanent additions to street corners and intersections. And we have maintained a position against all co-naming requests since 2009. I'll talk a bit about why on the next slide. And then the moratorium was reaffirmed to remain in effect without exception in January of 2024. For those who are on the board at the time, you might not remember taking a vote on this, and that's because we did not. We just wrote a letter saying that this is still our policy, and that's why we are talking about this today, because we want to, if we do want to go with something like that, we should vote on it. And then we forward our denial recommendations to city council and relevant city agencies.
And just so everybody understands like why we're taking this up again, what's happened is because we're not in the mix, applicants are going directly to the city council, and they would prefer not to be the first line on this stuff. So we have been asked to reconsider our moratorium.
So in terms of our moratorium, I linked to our resolution. Basically, the main concern, it's very short. The main concerns were visual clutter that creates confusion for pedestrians and drivers. Subjectivity would require us to make difficult decisions that are painful for applicants if they get denied. And that there are other ways to get recognition via plaques or embedded elements on a sidewalk. If you go around town, you might see them. One I can think of, for example, is There's a plaque in Madison Square Park to commemorate a police officer, and there are definitely other ones near me. And a clear policy provides a predictable framework for our applications instead of us, just getting people to come to us and being like, you should do this. And then we say, okay, or no. It's much better if we have a policy and people can know what to expect. And as David said, our elected officials have asked us to take the lead on this process because they don't want to be the first person to hear about it. And frankly, it's good for us to take the lead on this process because if they do skip us, then we don't have a voice, right? The idea behind the moratorium, I guess, was in theory, we would say no, and then they would never happen. In reality, we say no, and then they happen in spite of us. So by having a say, maybe we can have more control over what gets put on our streets. So now I'm going to go into a bunch of different community boards and what they do. I think I have 1 through 12. We'll go through these pretty quickly. Community Board 1 focuses on being very strict. They are a very dense district, very narrow streets, downtown Manhattan. And they have specific rules around the types of people who can be commemorated and the types of organizations. They also require a number of signatures within a 1-block radius. Some other boards do it differently. And if you already are co-named or have memorialized in another way, they don't approve it. CB2, so the Village, Soho, NoHo, that area, their guiding principle is to deny unless it's really extraordinary. So they have a long-standing presence in the community and they've been deceased for a number of years and there's substantial local support with a high signature threshold and an emphasis on them being very relevant to Community Board 2. So if they were to get someone from the Upper West Side who maybe played a concert or I don't know, maybe someone who was a comedian who came once in a while, they would say no. Community Board 3, Lower East Side, Chinatown. They also look for significant contribution. Individuals must have long-term commitments. Organizations must have been around for a very, very long time. And they need a certain number of signatures as well. Chelsea, Hell's Kitchen, and CB4 are neighbors to our west. They require supporting documentation of contribution, and they only approve a small number of secondary signs in the most extraordinary cases. And if there's local opposition, they tend to say no. CB6, neighbors to the east, their process is a bit streamlined. I would say they have the most recently updated process. They have to show a connection to the proposed location, and the candidate must fit a specific contribution type, and those requests go to the Transportation Committee. And usually they don't have a presentation, but when it's on the edge, they do. The one I've talked about in CB6 has been Jamal Khashoggi Way that they were pushing, or someone was pushing outside the Saudi Arabian embassy. I don't remember what happened to that one. CB7, Upper West Side, they focus a lot on the same. A lot of this is very similar. It'll sound very similar, but it has like little differences here and there, number of signatures. And the interesting thing about CB7 is that they have a process by which they review the secondary names after 10 years to see if it still makes sense to have them. CB8, they don't deal with it. They send it to their council members. This is, of course, an option for us if we want to continue to do that. And then some extra examples that were interesting. CB10 requires signatures after the committee has approved it. So instead of the applicant having to go through all the process to get the signatures and then coming to the committee, it's the other way around. CB11 requires letters of support from local organizations instead of just signatures. And then CB12 limits their requests to only twice a year. So I have set up a set of proposed guiding principles, and I actually put together a document that we can riff on or maybe discuss. But I think generally we should recommend a denial unless there's an extraordinary standard, because Midtown is incredibly dense. It is very visible. It has a lot of tourists. And we want to make sure that we're being pretty judicious with when we want to have street co-names, especially when you have tourists from all over. A good example is, well, I guess it's technically not a co-name, it's the official name of the avenue, but Avenue of Americas, people get very confused Sixth Avenue, Avenue Americas, what's going on? And I would hope that we would not confuse our tourists and our residents. And then co-naming is not a default recognition tool. We should encourage plaques, building commemorations, and other programs first. And so I kind of split the policy into things that they must meet and then maybe things with a little bit more subjectivity. So I think in terms of our hard gates that you have to meet all of them, the honoree must meet the council standards that, they can't get it unless they have it. So it makes sense that we would check for that too. Relevance to Midtown, so connection to our district and our neighborhood instead of just New York City broadly. A non-commercial and non-promotional, what's it called? Like Tiffany and Company Way, somewhere on Fifth Avenue, that would be promoting a brand. And then no material opposition. So if there's organized local opposition from a block association or building leadership or impacted institutions, we would say no. In terms of the higher bar to keep approvals rare, I think we should require the awaiting period for the honorees to be deceased for at least 3 years, similar to other community boards. We could have an exception for line of duty deaths if required, or if we're interested in that. Longevity, they should have a long-standing commitment and direct impact in Community Board 5, not just, again, to New York City. They should have a impact on, I already said that, organizations. If we do organizations, should only be nonprofits with 30 plus years of CB5 service. So maybe a food bank or something that's been serving the community for a long time. And then we shouldn't give honorees a street name co-naming if they already have a different co-naming somewhere else, or they have a memorial nearby or a plaque or something else. In terms of community standard support, I think we can look for a certain number of signatures from local CB5 residents or workers. I put 50, we can change that. And then at least 2 letters from organized local groups, be they block associations, tenant associations, bids, community institutions, and then also some sort of outreach documentation that they posted notices in case there are objections. I think we should have some sign management rules to ensure that we are limiting it to areas where there aren't maybe huge tourist pinch points. Times Square, for example, maybe closer to Central Park, and avoiding crash heavy or already cluttered intersections to make sure that we're not going to, have people get confused while they're driving and end up crashing where they otherwise might not. We should limit to 1 sign on an existing pole. Again, that's already the rules. And then some sort of volume control, perhaps only approving 1 per year. And then similar to CB7, requiring a formal 10-year renewal for a review for renewal. So in terms of the way this would work, the chair of the committee or perhaps the district office could do a pre-screen with an eligibility check for the things we talked about, location relevance, checking that it's not commercial, and sign constraints. And then we could, so one thing we did consider was fixed review windows. So for example, I think it was CB11 does it only twice a year, but those windows move around for the council. And I thought that earlier on in the process, we might want to have some flexibility on when we want to hear these. So I didn't put strict, only in April and October guidelines, for example. And then all applications would require a formal committee hearing and board vote. So that's the very quick overview of the ideas. This is all converted into a document. So let me share this in the chat for people who want to open it up. And this, in theory, are the guidelines that we would actually vote on if we were to have a vote. It should mostly just be what we talked about in the slide deck. I don't think that there's anything that is different, but quickly scrolling through it, let me actually change what I'm presenting so people can see, and then we'll do questions. Share. Oh, Nancy wants to delete a bunch of stuff. Nancy, can we hold off on suggested edits for now? I don't know if this was intentional.
Oh, no, it was not intentional. I just clicked on it. I'm sorry. No, I don't want
Don't worry.
no.
Okay.
Sorry,
I will,
sorry.
I
Take
will
that
reject
off.
this
Get
suggestion.
that
All right,
away.
it's
I
gone.
did
It's
not
gone.
mean that.
Okay, so let me zoom in a bit. There's a overview of why we're doing this. Then we start with the process that I just went over. So we would need at least 6 weeks notice, and we would before we would hear it at the transportation committee. There's a list of guiding principles that I talked about, the strict requirements where we want to have, people be deceased for a certain amount of time and documented lasting positive impact, relevance to Midtown, it to be non-commercial, non-political, and for there not to be material opposition. Then there's the high bar factors I talked about, which would be, if they're already recognized, then they would be denied. The rules for individuals with the waiting period, organizations being a nonprofit, and the amount of time. And then there's community support factors. This actually, I think, was 50 in the slide deck. So let me change this to 50. So 50 minimum 50 signatures, and then also 2 letters of support, and then public notice. And then, the guidelines around where we would or would not want these are also here. Then there's a list of instructions. This is not correct. Let me delete this. Where they would be submitted to the board office with notice, some basic information we're looking for, how they meet the requirements, so on and so forth. And then, so their application. And some community boards do have a template for how they want people to do their petition signatures. I didn't think we needed that. We just say that we want their name and address for each signer. So that is very quickly what we would vote on. The format might change a little bit, but this is the general idea. David, I'll kick it back to you to see where we want to go from here.
Yeah, I guess that was my question. In terms of process, we're obviously not going to get this done in the next 6 minutes. So, is the idea forming a small task force of people that will dig into this and come up with a proposal to come back to the committee? Is that the best way to do this, or what were you thinking?
I think that it's pretty fleshed out, to be honest, and I'm happy to share the slides around and the doc around. I think what we could do is just have people review the slides, maybe review the document, and then dedicate, let's say, 30 minutes at the next meeting and say, let's talk about it. Please, if we're going to do that, let's bring very specific changes we'd want to see. Like this should be 100 signatures instead of 50 signatures or something, just so we can really narrowly scope the conversation. And then hopefully after people have had a chance to look at it between now and then, and we have that short discussion, then we'll be able to take a vote.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is great. And you really took it pretty far along. So that's very helpful. All right, so let's do that. I mean, it'll be an online task force. Whoever wants to take a look at the document and make comments and review that with you. And we'll put it back on the agenda then for next month.
Sounds great.
Great. Okay. Anything else on this or other topics?
Just
Yeah, Joel.
Samir, can you share your presentation and include this link, the Google Doc link?
Yes, I will do both.
Just because once the chat goes away, it's hard to find it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll send it
this
to
was
David
great.
and he can
Thank
send
you.
it to the committee.
Okay. Yeah, Athena.
Samir, I so appreciate the work and the detailed research from the other community boards. Super helpful. I just have a question for you, which is like, what is our fundamental stance on this? Like, I'm kind of like, I'm with, I think you said community board 2, which is denial unless there's some extraordinary impact that could be proved in some way. So I went to a school whose name is still Washington and Lee University, and Lee stands for Robert E. Lee. And what I learned from this whole saga that is still ongoing is honor is something that, you know, when it's given, you're like so graciously receive it. And when someone tries to take it away, it is just this painful thing. And Robert E. Lee's been dead more than 3 years. So I could just, I am, I think my personal preference would be we take a much harder stance than what you've even proposed.
I think that there's a lot there. Broadly, my personal opinion is aligned with yours. If it could be my way, we would actually have no namings of any humans at all, maybe pets if we want, but no humans, because you never know, 100, 200 years from now, what, you know, I eat meat. Is that going to be like a horrible thing in 200 years? Maybe. Could very well be. And that being said, though, we are in a situation with everything on the community board that if we take too hard of a stance, we'd lose our voice. So that's what we've seen so far, is that if we say no to everything, then it happens without our input. So I think that we need to figure out a fine balance between letting enough through that we are taken seriously and, you know, while standing true to our values. In terms of what the stance generally has been, I think the beautiful thing about this opportunity is that the last time we voted on this was 2009. There may be a handful of members who are still here. Nancy is still here, and I believe she was on in 2009. Joel's here. But, you know, by and large, all the members are new. So we don't have to stick to whatever our old principles were. We have a new set of people and we could vote differently.
You know, I'd also add that I think it's worth circling back with our 2 city council members and seeing whether what we're proposing is what they had in mind when they asked us to take a look at this. If the 2 of them come back and say, yeah, we don't want to approve any of these things, I would probably, you know, weigh that in the process. So I think it would be helpful, you know, even in the early stage with this document, to get some feedback if we can from our 2 council members. Robert.
Yeah, I just had a question / comment about process. I know that you all just discussed this, but I, for what it's worth, think it's a good idea to have some sort of small task force on this. So I think the kind of line editing that David, you were maybe suggesting, or Samir, 50 versus 100 versus 150, I think that's going to be really tricky to do in 30 minutes because those issues implicate broader, you know, sort of broader issues about what our objectives are. And obviously all of the proposed changes are going to interrelate. So my suggestion, again, for what it's worth, is that we do some kind of task force, because I have a lot of ideas.
Are you volunteering? Are you?
I'm happy to participate. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anybody else that would be interested in focusing on this for a month? You can raise your hand, or you could send me a letter. All right. Well, look, I don't object to it, but we need the people to actually do it over the next 30 days. So Robert, if you're, you know, that focused on it, then I would say, yeah, let's do it. Engage with Samir on this and, you know, work through other people's comments on the document and
sure
come back for next, you know, in time for next month's meeting. I appreciate the, you know, the idea. That's where I started from, but I just, you know, finding people that'll focus on it is the challenge. But, you know, for a month, for a specific document like this, you know, we ought to be able to do it. So.
Sounds good.
Nancy.
Okay, so I just have, first of all, I have a question. How long does, the only one that I saw that had a limit on the length of time a street name co-name could be up was something about being renewed in 10 years. Was there anything else that you found, Samir, with the duration of how long this co-name can be up and
My
in place?
understanding is that they are permanent. I see there are still people from the DOT on the call. If they have the answer, they are welcome to unmute and correct me.
So that is my understanding, that they are permanent. They're a permanent fixture, and you're absolutely correct when you said they are below the signage of the street sign that's currently there. Yeah.
Okay, and then
they get authorized by local law. So
Mhm.
I think there might need to be a conversation with the council about what mechanism would be required to then take down the sign. In my experience, I don't think we've taken one down, but I also haven't been here for 10 years yet. So maybe there's a hope for that.
I have a second
Right.
question.
I'm sorry, Colleen, were you saying something?
I was just going to say that it is a local law, as most of you know, and that the street code naming, you would have to work very closely with your local council members. I mean, our role in this is that we manufacture the sign and we install the sign, and we work very closely with the council member on that. Just so you know.
I have two more questions. Does DOT, are you okay and allowed to do something with sidewalk embeds, which Samir mentioned, but it wasn't listed anywhere that I could see in your presentation. So I was wondering if that could be an alternate to a sign blade. And then my last question is, how many can you put up at one time? If the street number is there in the sign and you add a co-naming blade, can you add another one, or are you only allowed to have one per? You're shaking your head. One per street.
It's I think it's
I was
one per
curious.
intersection.
One.
So perhaps you could have multiple per street, but one per intersection.
Okay, and then my only final observation is there are a number of places, and I don't have them offhand, where there are no street sign up at all on any corner. I've come across that a number of times, and so I think that it's really important to maybe have street naming, but could we please get our street signs all back up and in place? That's my final comment.
If there's a location where there's a missing sign, please send it over to us and we can verify whether there's supposed to be a sign there and replace it if needed.
Todd?
Did I hear my name called?
Yeah, your hand is up.
Yes. I just want to applaud Samir. I think you struck just the right balance. There should be a very high bar with these street namings. As a resident of the city since 1984, it's just out of control. The naming of our streets as compared to legitimate historical namings of specific sites is really something. You'll notice that the city council members do this because it allows them to pander to specific interest groups. So a lot of them do it because it gets their names in the papers without regard to the historical import of a lot of these namings. And many of them that are more enlightened don't want to do it. So they're kicking it back to us. And I think that's well within our jurisdiction, especially if, as the picture you showed, it's just totally out of control, right? So congratulations, Samir. I support what you've recommended. High bar, common sense, and let the people in our district, the citizens that actually live here, have a little bit of input and deny them less. That's just the right way to do it.
Thanks, Todd. Okay, any other comments on this? So we'll schedule it for next month's meeting. And the micro task force can finalize the document, and maybe if we can distribute it in advance of the meeting, then.
Yeah, I'm limiting the scope of the task force to 10 members. So speak up.
Okay.
So that you can be considered.
Yeah. You have to work on this for 10 years. Maybe that's what we should do. We should just propose it and then act on it in 10 years. Okay, I think next month, Tiffany, I think you'll be ready with your micro hub thing, right? So
Yeah.
we'll talk
Yeah, I
about that.
sent out all blast emails again, and we did postings one more time. And yeah, I'll be ready next month.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, and see you on the next snowstorm.
Thanks.
Bye.
Christopher has
Thanks.
his hands up.
So,
Chris,
sorry, just one thing about the school streets
Oh, yeah.
team, because you sent the database and I emailed every single person on the database and I have absolutely no responses whatsoever in more than a week. So
Yeah,
I just want to know.
It's an old list, so that's part of the problem.
Okay, so should I ask the office to do it or should I?
Yeah, if you want to talk to Isabel and see if there's some other source of better information or.
All right. So that's what I will do. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.